They gathered in the luminous chamber of the galactic barracks, a spectacle of polished armor and radiant banners, where soldiers from across 100 worlds exchanged stories of conquest. The conversation, as it often did, drifted to Earth, a small, green planet that had joined the Council not long ago. To these armies of the stars, Earth was a backwater curiosity, known more for its untamed wilderness than any meaningful contribution to galactic defense. Laughter carried across the hall as generals and recruits alike found amusement in tales of humanity's so-called wilderness warriors. One officer, scaled and broad, raised his voice over the commotion. He described Earth's jungles as swamps of mud and insect bites, claiming that any true soldier armed with galactic discipline could sweep through them without effort. His peers cheered, delighted by the image of their mighty troops trampling over vines and brush. Another, a towering reptilian commander, scoffed that Earth's soldiers hid in foliage because they lacked the courage to fight in open fields where real armies tested their strength. The laughter was loud and unrestrained, punctuated by toasts made with glowing cups. They mocked the humidity, the endless rain, and the swarms of creatures that, to them, were mere annoyances unworthy of notice. Their training grounds, sculpted by technology, were designed to replicate every conceivable battlefield: deserts, icy planets, artificial voids. To these seasoned warriors, Earth's jungle was a childish stage, unfit to host a contest for professionals. They viewed humanity as a species trapped by nature, not masters of it, and their jokes carried the weight of centuries of arrogance. One lieutenant recounted how Earth's soldiers relied on camouflage and silence, as though invisibility was a sign of weakness rather than strategy. He compared them to frightened prey hiding from hunters. Another interrupted to sneer that Earth's so-called special units were nothing more than primitive survivalists who dressed in leaves and mud, an image that drew more laughter. They dismissed the very idea that skill could overcome technology, that endurance could counter machines designed with galactic precision. The mood in the chamber grew bolder, voices echoing with pride, and the humans' reputation shrank further in their telling. Among the younger recruits, whispers spread that humanity's strength was exaggerated by propaganda, that their military stories were fables designed to hide their inadequacy. They were told that Earth's most dangerous predators were beasts with claws, not soldiers with rifles. To them, a jungle was an obstacle course, not a battlefield. What threat could possibly lurk in vines and rivers, when they marched with plasma rifles, drones, and armor forged in orbital foundries? The idea of being challenged by a planet still clinging to soil and roots was absurd to the point of comedy. As the mocking carried on, the conversation shifted toward demonstrations. Plans formed casually, tossed around between drinks. Perhaps the Council should stage exercises on Earth, let its soldiers stand side by side with galactic armies. Some imagined the humiliation of humans attempting to keep pace with warriors from star empires. Others suggested it would be a useful lesson for Earth to witness what true combat looked like, to see that their traditions of stealth and endurance were relics of a forgotten age. The notion of Earth's jungle fighters competing against galactic troops was so amusing that even senior officers entertained it with smirks. Yet beneath the jeers, a tone of dismissal hardened into consensus. Earth's wilderness was not respected, it was trivialized. Its soldiers were not feared, they were ridiculed. The idea that mud, rain, and silence could serve as weapons seemed laughable when compared to the firepower of fleets and armored divisions. For the armies of the stars, Earth was a theater for jokes, not battles. Their pride was built on unbroken lines of conquest, and humanity was written into their ledgers as a footnote. The chamber quieted only when a veteran of countless campaigns spoke, his voice cutting through the mirth. He remarked that every species once underestimated an enemy, and every species carried scars for it. His words lingered for a moment, but the silence broke into renewed laughter. To them, Earth was no such enemy. The jungles of that small planet were nothing but wilderness, green, wet, and unworthy of a soldier's respect. And so the mocking continued, echoing through the walls of the galactic stronghold, dismissing Earth as insignificant. But somewhere beyond their reach, far below their orbiting fleets, in the shadows of tangled roots and endless canopy, the very thing they ridiculed was waiting. It grew in silence, it trained in patience, and it did not care for their laughter. The armies of the galaxy had not yet learned that wilderness was no weakness at all. The orders were given with an air of casual confidence. A contingent of alien soldiers was dispatched to Earth, not for war but for what they called a demonstration. It was meant to prove superiority beyond doubt, a spectacle to be observed and remembered. The jungles chosen as their proving ground were dismissed in briefing notes as a trivial landscape, humid, cramped, and filled with primitive hazards. They arrived certain that their armor, weapons, and training would turn this environment into a playground for their exercise. The first hour shattered the illusion. The air itself was an enemy, thick, wet, and clinging to every breath. Soldiers accustomed to sterile training domes found their vision blurred by constant sweat, and armor systems designed for efficiency began to strain under relentless humidity. The dense canopy blocked signals and disrupted positioning beacons, forcing them to rely on maps that shifted with every river bend and ridgeline. The jungle was not a battlefield waiting to be conquered. It was a living force intent on dragging them down. Marching formations that once moved with perfect precision soon dissolved into straggling lines. Boots sank into mud that swallowed steps whole, turning every kilometer into a grinding battle against the ground itself. Drones released to scout above the canopy faltered, colliding with branches before losing power and vanishing into the greenery. Attempts to clear paths with plasma cutters were answered by the jungle's stubborn resilience, vines and undergrowth growing back as if mocking every effort. Each advance became slower, each soldier more drained by the weight of equipment that felt heavier with every step. Then came the wildlife. At first, small insects pricked and bit through layers of armor, dismissed as minor nuisances. But they multiplied, swarming into crevices, clogging vents, and forcing soldiers to sweat constantly. The smallest creatures became relentless attackers, breaking concentration, disrupting rest, and eroding morale. Larger beasts revealed themselves in fleeting glimpses, eyes reflecting from the underbrush, movement that vanished before weapons could be raised. The jungle's silence was worse than its noise. Every pause in the chorus of animals suggested something nearby, watching. Rainstorms struck without warning, sheets of water pounding helmets and shorting exposed circuits. Rivers swelled in minutes, cutting units off from one another and forcing detours into even denser terrain. Lightning shattered the sky, striking so close that the ground trembled under their feet. Their commanders had prepared for hostile fire, for organized ambushes, for the clash of disciplined armies, but not for a world that waged war through climate itself. The jungle did not stop, did not rest, did not give them an opponent they could outgun. It simply smothered them. The soldiers who had entered with boasts now trudged in silence, their laughter drowned in exhaustion. Every step was a negotiation between balance and collapse. Armor that once gleamed under training lights was caked in mud, joints stiff with grit, once proud machines reduced to burdens. Food supplies spoiled quickly in the heat, forcing reliance on ration packs that tasted of metal and ash. Attempts at communication across squads faltered, signals scrambled by interference until voices became distorted whispers of static. The jungle severed their unity as efficiently as it drained their strength. When night fell, the darkness was absolute. Their helmets could pierce it with sensors, but only in fragments, as if the jungle itself conspired to cloak its depths. Soldiers gathered close, disturbed by noises that surrounded them on all sides. Some fired at shadows, wasting energy and ammunition on imagined threats. Others tried to sleep, but the constant buzz of life around them denied rest. The longer they stayed, the more they realized they had underestimated not a terrain, but a world that refused to be tamed. By the third day, exhaustion and frustration had carved deep lines into every squad. Orders to press further were met with hesitation that bordered on rebellion. The soldiers were still armed, still trained, still powerful by any galactic standard, but they were not winning. They were enduring, and endurance was slowly turning into defeat. A mission meant to showcase superiority had turned into a struggle to keep equipment intact and morale from collapsing completely. In their arrogance, they had believed the jungle irrelevant. But each hour exposed the truth. Their weapons meant little when vision was blocked, when circuits were drowned, when exhaustion dulled reflexes. The very environment that had been mocked in distant halls now dictated every action they took. What they once dismissed as wilderness was teaching them the meaning of vulnerability. And then, at the moment when their frustration reached its peak, when they believed the jungle had revealed all of its cruelty, the silence broke in a new way. Not with rain, not with insects, not with beasts. It was a silence sharper than before, deliberate, filled with intent. Something had entered their theater, something that moved with purpose rather than instinct. The soldiers, weary and frustrated, failed to notice the shift quickly enough. They had learned to fear the jungle, but they had yet to meet the ones who had mastered it. They were still adjusting to the punishing rhythm of the jungle when a new presence entered. The soldiers did not see them at first, only the effects: a patrol returning short one member, a weapon missing from its rack, a distant crack that echoed once and left only silence. The aliens had already struggled against heat and terrain, but this was something different. It was deliberate. It was human. The special forces did not arrive with noise or spectacle. They were there long before the aliens realized it, blending with vines, branches, and shadows. To the untrained eye they were no different from the forest itself, indistinguishable from the endless green. Every soldier carried not just equipment but experience, decades of lessons learned in environments that punished weakness. For them, the jungle was not an enemy, it was a partner, a shield, a weapon. The first clear sign came when an alien squad attempted to rest near a stream. A net of vines shifted above them, and within seconds their commander was on the ground, bound by his own equipment, stripped of his weapon. The unit scattered, firing in all directions, but they hit nothing. By the time they regrouped, the human was gone, leaving only confusion and fear. This was not a battle. It was a reminder that someone was watching, waiting, and choosing moments with precision. Alien technology, once their greatest pride, betrayed them here. Thermal scans showed everything: the heat of plants, the swarms of animals, the soaked ground radiating after a storm. Human camouflage defeated these sensors effortlessly, using mud, foliage, and an intimate understanding of how to break patterns. Even the most advanced drones failed to track what refused to stand out. Soldiers who relied on machines to reveal threats now saw only noise and deception. The aliens had been taught that numbers guaranteed victory, that an enemy could be overwhelmed by sheer force. But here, discipline fractured. A squad of 10 could be reduced to half before they understood they were under attack. Every disappearance carried weight, not just a missing comrade but the realization that their opponent decided when the fight began and ended. Panic eroded their cohesion. Orders barked from commanders carried less authority than the instinct to hide. Meanwhile, the special forces moved without haste. Their pace was steady, deliberate, each step chosen to make no sound. Their patience was their strength. They did not need to strike constantly, only at the right time. They relied on no external supply lines, living off what the jungle provided, their training shaping every meal, every drop of water, every movement through the dense canopy. Their endurance was not measured in hours but in weeks, honed through generations of soldiers who had proven themselves in wars hidden from the galaxy's eyes. The aliens felt the weight of being hunted. They fired at shadows, detonated explosives into empty thickets, and scanned endlessly for figures that refused to be seen. Sleep became impossible. Every rustle in the leaves suggested a rifle barrel. Every pause in the natural noise pressed on their nerves until even seasoned veterans felt unease creeping into their bones. They had been soldiers on countless worlds, but this was the first time they realized what it meant to be prey. One by one, squads broke under the pressure. Some abandoned heavy weapons to move faster. Others clustered together, hoping safety came in numbers, only to make themselves easier targets. Their commanders tried to rally discipline, but every order rang hollow against the reality that they no longer controlled the rhythm of this conflict. The humans decided when to engage, how to strike, and when to vanish again. By the end of the first week, the alien troops had lost more to fear and exhaustion than to direct combat. Their weapons still functioned, their armor still gleamed beneath layers of mud, but their confidence was gone. The special forces had turned the jungle into an ally so complete that every root, every shadow, every whisper of wind felt like part of their arsenal. The lesson began to take form within alien ranks. Technology meant little when the enemy could not be seen, when terrain bent itself to their will, when patience outweighed firepower. The soldiers who once laughed at the idea of humans in camouflage now understood the cost of that arrogance. They had not entered a wilderness. They had entered a domain ruled by men and women who needed no machines to dominate it. What had started as a demonstration had become a reckoning. The special forces did not fight to impress. They fought with the same methodical focus that had carried them through countless unseen wars. They did not need to announce themselves, because their message was written in the silence left behind after every strike. The aliens had mocked Earth's jungles, but now they discovered the truth. The jungle did not simply hide humans. It revealed who they truly were. Alien commanders, unsettled by mounting losses, shifted their tactics. They deployed orbital scans, saturating the jungle floor with imaging beams. They unleashed sensor drones, programmed to detect even the faintest motion. They instructed squads to abandon predictable patrol routes, to tighten formations, to fire on anything that moved without authorization. To them, discipline and technology had always guaranteed superiority. Here, those guarantees fractured. The scans revealed heat everywhere: sun-warmed rocks, drenched foliage steaming after sudden storms, animals darting in endless patterns. Camouflage fashioned by human hands blurred seamlessly into this chaos. Drones that scouted for movement were lured away with clever diversions, branches rigged to sway, decoys made from scraps of cloth, sounds manipulated to echo through the trees. Each adjustment by the aliens was countered, not with more firepower, but with patience and ingenuity. Special forces thrived where their enemies faltered. Their doctrine did not demand dominance over the jungle, it demanded harmony with it. They used its constant noise to mask movement, its density to shield approach, its unpredictability to dismantle structure. The aliens, bred on rigid formations and standardized responses, could not adapt at the same pace. Their attempts to impose order collided with an environment designed to resist control. Engagements unfolded like lessons. When aliens relied on thermal readings, their sensors filled with false positives, while real threats emerged from blind spots they did not anticipate. When they attempted sweeping advances, humans forced them into bottlenecks, using fallen trees and gullies to dictate direction. Even their superior weapons failed to secure victories. The jungle devoured beams of energy, scattering them against layers of vegetation, while bullets guided by discipline found clearer paths to their marks. Morale decayed under this constant imbalance. Soldiers who once marched with confidence now second-guessed every step. They no longer trusted their equipment, no longer believed that machines could reveal danger before it struck. Leaders shouted commands louder, but their authority weakened with every disappearance, every ambush, every trap sprung from the simplest tools. The realization crept into their minds: the battlefield did not belong to them. It had never belonged to them. The special forces pressed this advantage with calculated restraint. They struck where it mattered most: supply caches sabotaged, officers isolated, communication lines disrupted. These were not random attacks. They were deliberate efforts to strip away cohesion. The aliens could not match this rhythm because they were fighting not just soldiers, but a doctrine that valued unpredictability and subtlety over spectacle. They faced warriors who knew when not to attack, who understood that fear and uncertainty inflicted deeper wounds than direct fire. The clash of doctrines revealed a larger truth. Galactic armies had perfected war through repetition and replication. Every soldier drilled in the same way, every engagement modeled after centuries of predictable patterns. Humans, by contrast, embodied adaptation. They learned not by mimicking but by improvising, turning limitations into strengths. Where aliens saw a swamp, humans saw concealment. Where aliens cursed the rain, humans welcomed its cover. Where aliens lost cohesion in darkness, humans moved as if the night itself obeyed them. Soon, alien commanders stopped speaking of victory and began to speak of survival. Retreats were ordered not because of casualties but because of collapse and willpower. Soldiers resisted entering certain areas, convinced that every shadow concealed a threat. Entire platoons slowed their pace, unwilling to advance into territory where comrades had vanished without a trace. Fear achieved what firepower could not: paralysis. The jungle became an amplifier of this despair. Every buzzing insect reminded them of failure. Every downpour drowned their resolve. The environment they had dismissed as irrelevant now defined the terms of battle, and the humans had written themselves into its fabric. The aliens were not losing to numbers or weapons, they were losing to a mindset, a relentless patience honed by generations of warriors who accepted hardship as routine. For the first time, alien strategists admitted what had once seemed impossible: their doctrine was breaking. The structures that upheld their armies and every other theater crumbled in Earth's wilderness. They had believed themselves hunters, yet every movement reinforced the opposite truth. They were targets, marked not by their weakness but by their inability to change. Against an enemy that moved with the jungle rather than against it, their superiority dissolved into irrelevance. What lingered in every surviving soldier's mind was not the image of overwhelming attack but the suffocating presence of an enemy who never revealed their full strength, who allowed fear to fester until discipline unraveled. By the time alien officers considered withdrawal, the verdict was already clear. Their advanced doctrines had collided with something older, sharper, and infinitely more adaptable. They had entered Earth expecting to prove dominance, and instead discovered the futility of fighting those who had mastered survival itself. Extraction orders came with no celebration. Dropships descended through the canopy, retrieving units that were supposed to showcase the strength of the galaxy but now looked more like survivors of a disaster. Armor was battered, weapons dulled by mud, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. These were not troops returning from glorious combat. They were soldiers marked by a battlefield that refused to play by their rules. Their silence on departure spoke louder than any official report. When the council convened to hear the results, the commanders tried to frame the mission as inconclusive. They spoke of interference, of environmental factors, of insufficient preparation. Yet no amount of technical explanation could disguise the truth. Records of dwindling morale, scattered units, and unexplained losses made one fact unavoidable: the demonstration had backfired. The wilderness they mocked had exposed their weakness, and the humans they dismissed had proven themselves not as relics, but as masters of an art the galaxy had forgotten. The council chamber, usually alive with confidence, was subdued. Commanders who once joked about Earth's insignificance now avoided direct discussion of what had happened. The arrogance that fueled their laughter seemed dangerous in retrospect, as if mocking humanity risked inviting more humiliation. Reports circulated quietly among the highest echelons, stripped of embellishment, written with the precision of defeat. They described how soldiers failed not from lack of training, but because they faced an opponent who could not be measured by conventional metrics. The special forces had not waged war with overwhelming firepower, nor had they relied on numerical superiority. They had prevailed through something far more unsettling: complete command of unpredictability. To the galaxy's finest armies, combat was a science, repeatable and controlled. To the humans, it was closer to a language spoken with the environment itself. Their skill was not born from technology, but from discipline refined by hardship, from instinct sharpened in places where survival demanded creativity. Against that, the most advanced machines had proven fragile. Whispers spread quickly beyond the council. Soldiers who had been deployed shared fragments of their experiences, each story carrying weight even when details conflicted. Some spoke of enemies who appeared from nowhere, struck once, and melted back into silence. Others described nights where the forest seemed alive with unseen watchers, every sound pressing down until nerves snapped. These accounts spread fear, not because of numbers or casualties, but because of what they implied. Humans had revealed themselves not as equal participants but as predators whose battlefield extended beyond sight and imagination. The lesson was not lost on strategists. The idea of invading Earth shifted from bold speculation to a taboo subject. If small, hidden groups of humans could dismantle elite squads, what would entire nations, armed with the same philosophy, achieve against a larger force? The jungle had offered only a glimpse, but that glimpse was enough to alter perception across fleets and academies. Earth was no longer mocked for its wilderness. It was respected, and more importantly, feared. For humanity, There was no need for declarations. Their special forces returned quietly, vanishing back into the obscurity they preferred. No medals were flaunted, no speeches given. Their success did not require acknowledgement because their doctrine was built on silence and effectiveness. They had nothing to prove to outsiders. Their duty had been simple: to defend, to endure, to remind the galaxy that underestimating them carried consequences. What remained for the alien armies was reflection. They had entered convinced that victory was inevitable, that technology and tradition would carry them through any conflict. Instead, they were forced to confront a truth that undermined centuries of certainty. Humanity did not match their methods, humanity rewrote them. Where other species sought control, humans embraced unpredictability. Where others relied on machines, humans turned every hardship into an ally. And in doing so, they carved a place in the galaxy that no council vote could erase. The reputation spread like wildfire. In quiet barracks, recruits spoke cautiously of Earth's fighters, their voices tinged with unease. Veterans who had faced them offered warnings that resonated deeper than training manuals. Never underestimate humans, never step into their wilderness believing it to be empty. The galaxy had no shortage of formidable armies, but none carried the aura of mystery and inevitability that the special forces now commanded. And so the legacy of that failed demonstration grew. It was not written in parades or official communiques but in the fear etched into those who survived and the respect whispered by those who listened. The wilderness, once mocked as primitive, had proven itself a crucible that shaped warriors beyond comprehension. The special forces had shown the galaxy that humans did not merely survive in harshness. They excelled in it, turning adversity into dominance. For the soldiers of Earth, the outcome was simple. They did not need applause. Their success was measured in the silence left behind, in the hesitation of enemies who once scoffed and now thought twice. For the galaxy, the outcome was a revelation. Humanity was no longer a species to be laughed at. They were a force to be reckoned with, sharpened by jungles, tempered by hardship, and armed with a will that no machine could replicate.